Con el Inside Star Citizen. Que, bueno, en este caso se llama Interface Showcase. A ver, a ver, a ver. Vamos al lío. A ver, un segundito. Perfecto, precioso, maravilloso. Dentro asunto. Hostia.
So, yes, everybody is at home and the work continues, and that is the greatness. But it hasn't always been easy for Count Disco. Before everyone else went to WFH, it was decided that somebody had to stay behind and take care of the studio for when everybody returns.
Dice que está, que bueno, que todo el mundo no está y todo el mundo, y el mundo sigue y todo tiene su, y así está la grandeza de la movida. Y que el conde Lando tiene que cuidar del asunto, ¿no? Que alguien tiene que cuidar de las instalaciones mientras nadie está.
And because I'm quite valorous and ready to help my fellow creatures of the studio, it was decided it was going to be me. Now, being alone was not too difficult for Count Disco. As you know, I'm a bit of a lone lycanthrope, and when you're known often to be the cool ghoul at the school, you often have very no trouble making friends.
Oh, Dios mío. Oh, Dios mío.
Of course, the last episode did do pretty well. Igor was here, and we showed off, of course, all the things that we have seen, and it was so terrifying to everybody that watched it that it made the views very, very low.
Wow, scary.
Even though Halloween has come once again, I find myself not knowing if I have any terror left within me. It used to be that Halloween was the scary time. How are we supposed to go on with the pandemic and the work from home and the staying away from our werewolves? I know it's terrible. And now...
Dice, ¿cómo se supone que vamos a trabajar desde casa con la pandemia y alejarnos de nuestros lobos? Es complicado, dice, ¿no?
I haven't put on real pants in like 7 months. Where does Count Disco fit in when it seems like the world is already scary 365 days a year? Come on, Pico. Let me see you. Oh, he's a good Pico. Yes. How are you doing, Pico? What is that, Pico? It is time to make some real content?
¿Es tiempo de hacer un contenido verdadero?
So,
Le pregunta a
the
Pico.
next order of business, we started by attempting to get the Will Weissbaum to reveal the secret twist ending to Squadron 42.
Okay, so you're standing there at the edge, and that's when you realize, as the whole structure comes down, that who you thought was actually your enemy was you the whole time. You realize that you've actually been dead, and then we flash back to the beginning, revealing you're not in the future at all, but you're actually in the year 2020. So that's when you discover, like, after this whole...
Bueno, están haciendo una coña de que en realidad este es el final de Escuadrón 42 y que dice que cuando acaba la campaña todo se desploma sobre ti, te das cuenta de que en realidad tu verdadero enemigo eras tú y demás, y que en realidad es el año 2020.
Long reflection, you realize that there isn't two of you worlds within moments realize
The results were mixed. When that didn't work, we contacted Benoit Turbulent and tried to get to the bottom of the greatest mystery of all time. Why doesn't the website remember who I am?
Honestly, Disco, I've been trying.
Van a hablar con el de Turbulence que dice uno de los misterios más grandes de todos los tiempos, de por qué la web no nos recuerda quién somos, ¿no? Porque cada vez que tenemos que entrar, joder, le tenemos que dar otra vez a meter el código, tío, es jodidamente jodido. Jodidamente jodido.
Trying to forget you for the past 5 years.
We even tried a reality television spin by having the one and only Chris Roberts do our yearly performance review, live for everyone to see. It was faint praise, but I think you'll agree, we earned it. Of course, one of the most anticipated new features is the new manufacturer-specific user interfaces for spacecraft currently in development. So now let's take a very first look at the approved style soon to make its way to the Aegis ships, and the new functionality that will be coming along with them.
Hostia, pues bueno, pues que van a enseñarnos el tema de las de AX Dynamics y pues de la la nueva apariencia, ¿no? De lo que son las pantallas y demás. Y además que con la SX viene también la funcionalidad de gestión de energía. Vamos a ver de qué va el rollo.
Here we'll finally be able to know what direction we're going. I'm going this way.
The UI that you see on a movie like Iron Man or Avengers or whatever, that's designed to work for maybe 2 seconds on screen and to tie into the backstory. But when we're trying to translate that across, trying to hit that feeling, it is quite difficult because for the HUD, for example, there's something like 40 or 50 different pieces of information you've got to show. Functionality is our main thing, so we have to try and look at those movie ones and try to extract those elements, but still.
Me está diciendo de que cuando miramos pelis como de Iron Man o demás historias, que vemos una interfaz que está para mostrarse ahí durante 2 segundos y tal, y que como que tratan de transmitir esas sensaciones. Cuando hablamos de esto, ¿no? Que tratan de transmitir esas sensaciones que se ven en las películas y demás. A la interfaz es una locura.
Apply them to the game UI. So where shall I start? Tell you what, I'll begin at the beginning. So we decided that the UI in the game is okay, but we really want to kind of up the quality bar on it.
Aegis Combat Assist activated.
We have a fairly comprehensive list of what we needed to be displayed on the HUD. What's there in game at the moment doesn't cover all of that.
There were 2 major pushes towards getting the Aegis style right. The first of those, we kind of focused on the look mainly. So there's a lot of design considerations. For example, we want to make sure that everything's got a decent amount of space. Legibility is a big thing. If you've got text in there,
Está diciendo de que quiere que, bueno, que la interfaz que tenga o sea, que sea legible, que tenga un espacio y bueno, que vaya con un estilo también.
needs to be big enough to see. We also try and make similar things look similar. So if you have a button, it needs to look like a button. Also, we want to avoid things like overlaps. You don't want things to be on top of each other. And in general, with the new HUD as well, what we're trying to do is keep the flight information on the left and save the right-hand side for kind of mode-specific stuff.
Que dice que como que tratan de mantener en la parte de la izquierda, que van a tratar de mantener lo que es la información de vuelo, y en la parte de la derecha, información más específica.
For kind of mode-specific stuff.
Y que cuando hagan un botón, si eso tiene que ser un botón, quiere que se parezca a un botón. O sea, quiere que tengan esa forma, ¿no?
During the design process for this phase, we took the opportunity to add in some much requested fan favorite features, such as having a compass, which will aid in navigation both in.
Sí, joder, perdona chavales, pero Dios, por fin. Quieren que tengamos un compás, tío, por fin, joder, por fin. Dios, pero ¿en base a qué? ¿Qué es la movida?
Atmosphere and space, and between those 2 modes, it's either relative to the planet or relative to the galactic plane, and a radar altimeter. So in game at the moment, you do sort of have a altimeter, but it's only relative to the perfect Z0 height of the planet. So mountains aren't accounted for, whereas this will account for that.
Vale, están hablando de que vamos a tener, por un lado, un compás que tenga referencia al astro y otro que tenga referencia al plano del universo. Y además que quieren poner un altímetro que te diga la distancia que tienes a suelo. Porque ahora mismo el altímetro que tenemos es del nivel del mar del planeta y sabéis que las montañas están por encima del nivel del mar. Y bueno, pues así nos damos las hostias que nos damos, ¿no?
With the design doc in hand, we went ahead and made our second push on the concepts. Once we have the general look of it sketched out, then it's on to making the visual target. So we'll get the artist to come up with the final artistic look of it. And once everybody's happy with that, then we kind of punt it back to the designers and say...
Vale, esto que estamos viendo aquí están diciendo que están buscando, pues evaluando varios diseños y cuando encuentren el objetivo, o sea, que quieren conseguir, pues avanzarán más.
Okay, is this working for you? And quite often, to start with, the answer is no, it's not. So what they're interested in is that, hey, maybe it looks nice, but they really want to get across all the gameplay information. So we might tweak around the positions of a few elements, but it's things like make sure the fonts are big enough, make sure that the bars are strong enough. Then we pass that back to the artist, and there's kind of this cycle goes on for a little while. Well, the designers kind of give their feedback and the artist kind of tries to address it, and eventually we get somewhere where everybody's happy. I think what we've ended up with after all this kind of concept and design work is something that's quite unique for a game because it's been very well designed and it's also had a lot of time visually to try and get it looking good.
Están diciendo de que de que, bueno, que cuando empiezan a hacer este tipo de diseños, pues tienen que contar tanto con el artista, digamos, realiza pues una serie de diseños, luego los diseñadores dan su feedback y si todo está bien, pues se sigue adelante o se modifican cosas y que también no solo hay que tener en cuenta el aspecto bonito de las cosas, sino también la funcionalidad, asegurarse que las barras tengan el grueso suficiente para que se vean y que está bastante entusiasmado con el resultado que van a obtener y que va a ser un resultado interesante para un videojuego en definitiva, por el mismo que le han puesto, ¿no? El tiempo que han tenido, que están invirtiendo para diseñar este tipo de visual.
So if we look at the final concept, we'll go over some of the features that are there now. If we start at the top, this is where all your warning messages are primarily, so these will cascade in, and much like the current version, they will be coloured to indicate severity.
Me dice que la primera parte que tenemos ahí es donde todos los mensajes generales van de emergencia, que irán como en cascada.
Directly underneath that is a new element dealing with your emissions or signatures and sort of infrared cross-section and EM signature relative to the background, which is going to be very cool for stealth gameplay. And then
Lo que tienen aquí es una especie de medidor de imágenes de M, de calor y demás, que puede ser algo bastante chulo para lo que es el gameplay sigiloso. De tener aquí un tema, una medida, ya veremos a ver cómo va.
we have sort of the main piece of the HUD, which is much wider than we currently have, and that has everything to do with your velocity, thrust capacity, your thrust amount, your fuel amount, your vertical bearings, and then your altitude above the ground.
Dice que ahora tenemos como un más amplio, donde podemos ver la variedad o sea, los grados, la cantidad de potencia que tenemos en los thrusters, la velocidad, el altímetro, 1657 metros por segundo. No sé yo, a ver, eso puede ser una locura. No sé yo, no creo que sea eso.
We have two little spherical widgets, which is sort of your 3D velocity indicator, because quite often in space, where you're pointing is not where you are actually heading, so these will give you some visual indication of that in 3D. And then right at the very
Claro, dice que esto de a ver.
bottom we have your sort of status warning, so whether you're in coupled or decoupled, whether ESP is on.
En esta parte de aquí queda muy claro.
Of that in 3D, where you're pointing 3D velocity indicator, because
En principio dice que esto es la velocidad, el indicador de velocidad en 3D, porque dice que bueno, que efectivamente cuando tú estás en el espacio no siempre vuelas hacia donde quieres, que ahora lo que tenemos es el vector de movimiento, que es lo que nos indica.
Sort of your 3D velocity indicator, because quite often in space, where you're pointing is not where you are actually heading, so these will give you some visual indication of that in 3D. And then right at the very bottom we have your sort of status warning, so whether you're in coupled or decoupled, whether ESP is on, whether you're in VTOL mode, your landing gear, your countermeasure status, and then finally bottom right is what sort of weapon firing mode you're in, whether it's...
Claro, luego aquí tenemos, o sea, en la parte de la izquierda tendríamos lo que es el estado desacoplado, bueno, todos los estados que tienen que ver con el cómo vuela la nave. Y luego pues a la derecha pues tenemos ahí las contramedidas, chaff flare y el tipo de apuntado que estamos usando, gimbal, auto, asistido, gimbal o fijo, ¿no?
Auto gimbals here, manual gimbals or fixed.
So in the background, while the visual development's been continuing, we've been working on the building block stuff, which I'm sure you've heard a lot about. One of the key things we've done recently is this system where we can layer the UI, so we can have like layers of flat UI, which lets us achieve this sort of three-dimensional holographic look. And then we'll be handing all that stuff over to the vehicle feature team so they can actually start to implement it. So the next steps, at the moment we're just finalising what the MFDs are going to look like, and as you probably know, there's loads of other manufacturers in the game, so potentially we'll work on something like RSI or Anvil or Drake next, so it goes through the same process. But because we've done the first one already, that process should be a lot quicker now, and as we get through more, we'll get into a good flow.
En resumidas cuentas dicen que bueno, que también han diseñado pues ese sistema de tarjeteo de misiles, de fijado de misiles en 3D. y que el resto de marcas pues recibirán este pase también para mejorar la interfaz y que debería ser más rápido porque ya que han conseguido la primera pues las otras marcas deberían ir más rápido, ya sea RSI, Drake o lo que toque, ¿no?
Of course, to find my flow, I will often check the online feedback. Look what the people said last year. This is so cringe. This is so cringe. This person is so terrified. They're cringing in terror. Yes, Count Disco is so cringe. He is the most cringe creature in the county. This next comment reads, "Don't ever do this again. They're begging me not to continue. But we will show them. Count Disco does not know how to listen."
Dice que los comentarios del año pasado con respecto a su representación, su rollo de cosplay de Conde Drácula y demás, que he recibido esos comentarios, que da igual, que él va a continuar con lo suyo, que el Conde Lando nunca se rinde.
So yes, it is for the people's terror that I must go on. Of course, after a long while, food became a pressing concern. Searching the studio, Count Disco discovered a collection of potatoes being saved for Day of the Vara. And not knowing how long this quarantine would last, he knew he must make them last.
Me dice que descubrió un saco de patatas para el día de la vara.
And once everything was ready, there was really only one thing left to do. He'll have to science the shit out of this one. Scroll. It wasn't long before the results of these labors bore delicious vegetables. During the evenings, we discovered the lights are on a timer that Count Disco does not fully understand. It was a minor hindrance, but the proper conservation and management of power is an important aspect of life in both the studio and the persistent universe. This is why we contacted the Dan Truffin from the PU Future Team to share with us an early development prototype for the management of power and resources in spaceships,
Qué buena.
space stations,
Ahí viene lo de la
and
energía,
hopefully,
el manejo de la
the
energía,
studio.
chavales. Vamos a ver.
The purpose of prototyping, especially for anything gameplay related, is to prove that it's fun. If you
El proceso de un prototipo, cualquier cosa relacionada para lo que es el gameplay, su propósito, que sea divertido.
don't have it fun with a cube and a sphere, you can put all the pretty paint on top of it. It's never going to be fun. So with the resource management, we have this idea that there is one way the resources are managed throughout the entire game. There's one way to consume them, one way to produce them, and all the items everywhere, they use the same system. So we started by creating this small example of a ship where we have a power plant.
Bueno, este señor lleva como, creo que más o menos sobre febrero, por ahí puede ser. Hizo una propuesta, estaba haciendo una propuesta que fue aprobada por Cloud Imperium Games de hacer precisamente una especie de esquema de gestión de energía que se puede aplicar en todas las naves y para todos los objetos que estuviesen en una nave. Y pues ahora supongo que estamos viendo el resultado de ese trabajo, que ha sido pues casi durante un año.
We have a fuel tank, a battery, we have lights inside the ship, we have turrets, we have weapons. We try to build a priority system, so you never want your lights to have the same priority as, for example, your power plant.
Aquí está haciendo una cosa importante, que tenemos batería, tenemos planta de potencia, tenemos luces, que sería esto, armas, ¿no? Y demás. Entonces dice como que tratan de establecer un orden de prioridad para las cosas, pues no, evidentemente las luces no tienen la misma prioridad que una power plant, ¿no?
For your weapons. Basically,
O
as
tus
soon as we
armas.
start the simulation, the power plant goes, I'm online now, but I have no fuel. So all of this energy right now, the lights start draining the battery. If we put some fuel in the fuel tank, as soon as we put it in, the power plant starts going online, the battery starts replenishing because there's not that many consumers online. If I go, okay, let's say I set my weapons, my laser weapons to fire, as soon as I do that, there will be more drain on the energy. We can actually see we have a simulation of resources. We know we're producing this much power and we're
Vamos a parar un momentito para explicar. Esto sería el fuel. En cuanto llena el fuel, hemos visto cómo se drenaba la batería, luego enciende las armas y entonces empiezan a drenar pues de aquí, ¿no? Drenar de aquí y vemos cómo va consumiendo.
Requesting this much. We're running everything through exactly the same system. Now, same thing. Let's say someone takes out our power plant because it got shut down or got sabotaged. Automatically, now we're on battery power. It might go, okay, we don't need weapons now. We're gonna turn them off. Lights, I only need the one in the front, so I'm conserving a bit of battery power until I can repair my power plant. Once I repair my power plant, this goes.
Vale, o sea, vamos a entenderlo un poco mejor porque tenemos por aquí lo que está explicando, bueno, de la power plant. Pues va a cargar también la batería, de que tenemos la batería cargada supuestamente. Entonces, nosotros si tenemos la power plant funcionando, está consumiendo combustible y está alimentando al resto de sistemas de la nave. Pero en el caso de que, por ejemplo, nos disparen a la power plant, pues de repente, pues hasta que la puedas reparar, pues apagas el resto de sistemas y dice que pues conserva solo una luz para poder tener los sistemas básicos de la nave funcionando.
Goes online and I can start turning stuff on again. And this was our first thing we did, where we built the ship, and we built this tool in a way that allows us to build different ship configurations. So as you can see, you can kind of understand the basic shape of a hammerhead. As soon as I turn on the simulation, we can see we have
Entonces, claro, eso era un esquema para poder utilizarlo para varias naves. La cosa cambia, ¿no? Al escalar. Y esto sería la configuración básica de una hammerhead. Y bueno, pues que van a empezar la simulación para que veamos cómo funciona.
both power plants are starting to produce power. The fuel tank starts to get drained. The battery is on full capacity. We have these relays. Relays are a new concept that we're introducing in the ship. In order for all those resources to travel from the fuel tank to the power plant, from the power plant to the battery, from the battery to the lights, everything travels through these relays.
Está diciendo que han introducido un nuevo componente que se llama el relay. El relay lo que hace es que es un puente de comunicación entre la power plant, las luces, la batería. De que todo es como un puente de conexión, como un enlace. Y bueno, pues aquí vemos cómo tiene lo que sería el fuel y aquí la batería, que vemos que está funcionando y alimentando todo guay. Las dos plantas de potencia que están por aquí.
Now each relay you have on your ship is going to consume power. So the less you have, the more efficient you're going to be. The more you have you're going to be more redundant. For example, in this case, let's say someone sabotages this and they destroy this part. You can see already this part of the ship lost resources. If we lose this one, this power plant is off. Let's say now I need to start shooting. So I'm manning my turrets and they're shooting. I'm starting my hammerhead doesn't have these weapons exactly here. We're just trying to simulate a ship at this point. You will start notice my lights started going off because in the priority my lights are very low priority. If you look at the battery is starting to drain. Let's say at this point it reaches 0. It ran out. Now this turret is off. It doesn't have power. This one is not running at what we requested because there's only one.
Vamos a pararnos aquí. Lo que está sucediendo ahora es que lo que está comentando que cuantos más tengas, eso también consume energía. O sea que cuanto menos tengas en una nave, más eficiente será. Pero claro, también está poniéndolo desde el punto de vista de que si alguien sabotea uno de estos nodos y pues empieza a cerrar puertas para que la potencia llegue a los diferentes sitios, ¿no? Pues en este caso lo que ha hecho es que se ha saboteado todas estas partes, por lo tanto no llega a full la planta de potencia está apagada y en este caso la batería empieza a drenarse porque ha puesto que aquí hay pues las armas puestas de la Hammer, que dice que no, o sea, no es que las armas las tenga aquí la Hammer, sino que es para hacer una simulación. Entonces está comentando de que de repente pues tiene que apagar otros sistemas y además vemos cómo se apagan las luces directamente. Cuando esto sucede porque estas luces no tienen prioridad y las armas sí, entonces como que es un sistema que de forma automática da prioridad a las armas sobre las luces.
Power plant running right now. Now if I have a mechanic on board, he'll go, okay, this relay is broken, get power back to that power plant. As soon as we got power back to the power plant, we're starting to get our resources back.
Claro, dice que luego si tienes un ingeniero, pues dice que va a arreglar los relays, tendrá que arreglar los relays que dándole prioridad para poner esa power plant en funcionamiento, es decir, que esa power plant reciba el combustible de aquí, a través de aquí, a través de aquí, a través de aquí. Y Y entonces ya vemos como de repente pues todo se ha puesto otra vez online.
Back, lights start going back online. We're back in business at this point. But let's say we have, I don't know, a smarter saboteur that goes, well, I kind of see how this ship is configured. I'm actually going to cut it in half. And this is usually like a worst case scenario. The system is smart enough to understand the idea that once a ship is cut in half, this front part of the ship has its own resource network, and this part of the ship is its own resource network. So it runs them in.
Es interesante. Vamos a decir que hay alguien inteligente, dice, que es capaz de cortar la nave en dos porque conoce de separar la potencia en dos porque conoce la estructura, la configuración de la nave. Entonces, haciendo esto sería el peor escenario posible, que te sabotee de esta manera. Y el sistema es capaz de reconocer que ahora mismo este sistema es independiente de este otro, que tienen independencia.
Independently, so everything in the back gets powered by these two power plants, but anything in front is completely dead because our battery is dead. As an engineer, your main goal is going to be to keep your ship as operational and as efficient as possible. So let's say now I'm transporting goods. I'm just moving from A to B.
Claro, está diciendo que en ese caso pues la parte de toda delantera estaría muerta porque la batería pues estaría agotada, ¿no? Que es lo que vemos aquí. Vamos a ver, en esto se ve pues que toda esta parte estaría tal. Y que tu objetivo como ingeniero es tener la nave lo más eficientemente posible.
But anything in front is completely dead because our battery.
Todo lo que está delante está muerto,
As an
¿no?
engineer, your main goal is going to be to keep your ship as operational and as efficient as possible. So let's say now I'm transporting goods. I'm just moving from A to B. It's a pleasure cruise, no problem. I never want to travel like this. Each of these relays is going to be a drain on resources. So I'm going to turn this one off because I can turn this one off and I can turn this one off, and power and resources still have a route to travel, and I'm still keeping everything online. I'm trying to minimize the number of things that I'm powering on the ship. So this.
Claro, lo que está haciendo ahora es que, digamos que queremos transportar unos bienes de punto A a punto B. Pues para nosotros mover la nave no necesitamos toda esa cantidad de relays activos. Simplemente pues vamos a hacer un que funcione eficientemente desactivando y dejando solo los mínimos necesarios para ser más eficiente a la hora de pues no gastar tanto combustible, etcétera.
This would be a viable configuration in which I'm still keeping everything on the ship fully functional. But let's say I go into battle. With this configuration into battle, if I take a hit here and this gets shot or gets sabotaged, I instantly lost half of my firepower. So it's a good thing to use when you're not in danger. When you're in danger, you just switch stuff to a more redundant system. Besides this, with.
Claro, dice que cuando estás en batalla, pues hay que ir por un sistema más redundante y tener todo activado, pero cuando no estás en batalla, pues puedes tener esos sistemas apagados. La verdad es que va a ser muy importante, chavales. Un ingeniero va a tener mucho que buscar en una nave gorda.
All the overclocking and setting power levels, setting resource levels for each items, setting priorities, I think that the engineer is going to be a crucial part of the ship.
Claro que además el ingeniero puede configurar prioridades, overclock. Está diciendo que el ingeniero va a ser una parte crucial de la nave, o sea que realmente una persona que es ingeniero va a estar todo el día ocupado.
So this is where we are right now with this prototype. This is going to take quite some time to implement. This touches on a lot of systems, a lot of stuff will have to get refactored, but we're hopeful that once this reaches the live environment, this is going to make the game so much better for everyone involved.
Claro, dice que esto va a llevar un tiempo porque además recae en otros sistemas. Ya sabemos que, bueno, que el iCache probablemente sea uno de ellos. Y que cuando esto esté implementado en el juego, pues será mucho más divertido para todos jugarlo, desde luego. O sea, pinta muy bien, ¿eh?
Well, the future of resource management for spaceships in the persistent universe seems like it's going to be a very robust and rewarding experience for engineers and pilots alike. But alas, it is time to let you go. Yes, we have reached the end of our harrowing Halloween hunt. But if I learned anything this week, it is that it may not always be the easiest thing to find our motivations for each and every day. To remember the why that we do with the must, and for the others who need us to be brave, very especially when the world wants to be, well, scary. But if you're like me, we can find what we need in the shared purpose to explore the creation of the most ambitious space game of all time. And in our
Dice que bueno, que en estos tiempos hay que ser valiente para aquellos que tienen tienen miedo por el tema de la situación que está viviendo del coronavirus y demás. Que pues, además ese coraje se puede ganar pues haciendo el juego más ambicioso, el jugador espacial más ambicioso, ¿no? Star Citizen.
Growing community of friends who join with us to make it all possible. Now, I don't know how much longer things will be like this, but rest assuredly that when the time is right, the studio will be found in very good hands. These hands,
Hostia.
they're good. For the easy hab of horror, I am Count Disco. Until the next time.
Madre mía. Pues, chavales, espectáculo, espectáculo. Corto aquí y nos vemos ahora. Vamos a ver, espectáculo, ¿eh?